السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Getting started soon. Just a couple of ground rules for this live session today. We're not going to take live questions in terms of you're not going to be allowed to raise your hands and ask questions to Mufti. Instead, scan the QR code. There should be 2 here, and if it's too far, there should be here and on the sister side too. You will be able to scan and ask your question there. However, Mufti will take in any follow-ups to the questions that he's actually answering. So if Faris asks him a question about a certain topic and you have something that's not clear, you can just raise your hand and Faris will pick you and you can ask a follow-up. Inshallah. Okay, let's get started.
Right. Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Jazakallah khairan again, Mufti Hammad, for coming. For those who don't know, Mufti Hammad is a Mufti who specializes in Hanafi Fiqh. So that's why we had the option for those who were interested in Hanafi questions specifically. So if you'd like to keep that in mind, that'll be good. And we'll go ahead and ask with the first question. So the first question is, what are the rulings on women for in terms of reading and recitation Quran during the time when they're unable to pray?
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa kafa was salatu was salamu ala Sayyidil Habib al-Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi nujumil huda wa qadatit tuqa amma ba'd. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وعملا يا رب العالمين آمين ثم ما بعد. Welcome everyone. Just a disclaimer. Although yes, I have specialized in Hanafi fiqh, today's session, for certain answers, I will also mention the Shafi'i ruling, inshallah ta'ala, as well. Today afternoon, I had probably about an hour phone call with Sheikh Zakaria Abdul Aziz. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, so we caught up a little bit, and I went through a few of the questions just to confirm the Shafi'i position on some of those points as well, inshallah. But the first question, which is with regards to the recitation of the Quran, the touching of the Quran, etc., for a woman, for a female during her menses, her monthly cycle. Both the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school are pretty much in agreement on this topic, that yes, during the days of her cycle, she is not permitted to read the Quran, recite the Quran, or even touch the Quran. Right? And this is because she is in a state of major ritual impurity, in a state of janabah, as we say. Right? This is one point to understand about this, is that this is the same for males and females, even outside of her monthly cycle, when they are in the state of janabah, after intimacy, or after a wet dream, etc., or after a person does something where they've ejaculated, even if it's in a haram manner. They are now in the state of janabah until they do ghusl. So even for a male, this is a period when they're in the state of major ritual impurity, when they require ghusl, they're also unallowed to touch the Quran or even recite the Quran. Right? And so this is the same even in the Shafi'i school and the Hanafi school, that a woman in her monthly cycle is not permitted to recite the Quran or even touch the Quran. Yes, there is permissibility if she is reciting certain verses of the Quran which are generally read as regular adhkar, dhikr, and as well as dua. Right? Like for example, you have رَبَّنَا أَتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. You have the dua رَبِّ ارْحَمْهُمَا كَمَا رَبَّيَانِي صَغِيرًا. Right? These are du'as. And if a person recites those with the intention of recitation, then with the intention of dua or dhikr, that is permitted and it is allowed. And I was discussing with Sheikh Zakaria, and he was mentioning that part is a little bit more stricter in the Shafi'i school than it is in the Hanafi school as well. So they even are a little bit more strict on that part of the adhkar and the dua aspect of things as well. But otherwise, that is the general ruling for a woman in her menses. Any follow-up questions on that one? Generally, I think we had that question about 2 or 3 times in the list. It came, so I do feel may need some clarification. No? We're okay, inshallah? All right.
Okay, perfect. The next question is, what is the permissibility of voting in democratic elections?
This is, from the list that we got, we'll leave some time for open questions via the QR code, but we did have a list of questions, and I made notes of a few. Ones that I think require a little bit more, elaboration, but maybe not so much from the standard view we may always be looking at, right? Just some, food for thought, right? Some things to think about. The first question I'll pose to you guys is, how many people have even heard this question, or like the entire debate surrounding this topic? How many people have heard that it is you're a kafir if you vote, right? Or it's shirk to vote. Right? I think many of us may have heard that opinion, especially right now with voting going on for the Ontario election. So this is maybe something that we may have heard. The basis of this whole debate is what we will say either an understanding or a misunderstanding of the Quranic verse, "Inil hukmu illa lillah." Right? The verse says in the Quran, "Inil hukma illa lillah," that the rule is only for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? That Allah is the one who legislates. He is the one who defines what law is to a Muslim. So He is the one who legislates. And so they say that when you vote in a democratic election, you are affirming someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be a valid legislator. So you're putting someone up there next to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to also be a legislator. That's essentially where this topic kind of boils down to, right? And I think this is a misunderstanding, number one, of the verse, and also I think a misunderstanding of the entire idea of a democratic state to begin with. What is a democracy and what is an election in essence? I think there's a misunderstanding in that regard as well, right? This is important because we're not saying that the democratic government, for example, the Liberal Party, up until Mr. Trudeau decided to give up his resignation, right? But we're not saying that he is legislating what is actually moral and what is actually the truth, or what is actually haqq and batil, what is truth and falsehood, right? He's not telling us what is moral and what is immoral, right? What they are essentially doing is they are creating laws, rules, so that a country can run in some sort of orderly fashion, right? Making it so that people can live their lives in that land with some sort of, framework or system where they can go and, acquire some sort of justice if they are wronged, right? In some sort of scope or in some sort of system, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to define some laws or bring in some laws to just make sure that the country runs in some sort of, with some sort of, being civil. Because if you go to countries, and I lived in Africa for a few years, right, and for 3 years in South Africa, when people do not respect the law of a country, you will see the level of chaos in a country. You will see how people are scared to even leave their homes, right? I say this, and alhamdulillah, I've been fortunate to travel to many countries in the world. South Africa is probably one of the most, if not the most beautiful country I've ever visited. But it is probably maybe one of the last countries I would ever want to live in. And the reason why is you are scared to leave your front door the moment it goes dark, right? And it's because there is a country which has laws, but the laws are not upheld, they're not obeyed, they're not followed, and it's very difficult to get justice for anything, for example, right? And so my point being, again, is that the people in that position of power, their point is not to define what is moral and immoral, right? That changes as per generations, as per societies, from country to country, right? Like the topic always comes about like the age of Aisha radiallahu anha, when she got married. And when you have that topic, we always talk about there was that time, there was this time, and we give examples of prophets that are mentioned in the Bible and the wives that they've had and the age that they were. We're not going into that debate. But my point is things change as per generations, different societies, different civilizations, right? But they're not defining what is moral and immoral, like the current democratic government. For example, right, cannabis is legal in Canada, right? But does that mean it's moral now? Does that mean it's something we should do, right? As believers, we are not being forced to smoke, are we? Right? Smoking cannabis and doing anything with cannabis is haram. But we're not being forced to do it, are we? If somebody wants to, they can legally, in the country, go and do it. But now, if there is a law that prevents a believer from fulfilling his or her obligations, fara'id, right? The obligations that they have on their religion, in their religion, what is that person actually required to do? According to the scholars, that person has to make hijrah. If a country that you're living in is prohibiting you and stopping you from fulfilling your obligations, like they completely prevent you from performing your salah, they do not allow you to pray, you'll be required to make hijrah. You'll be required to make migration. You'll be required to leave that country. Right? Why did the Prophet ﷺ leave Mecca? He was not allowed, they were not allowing him to propagate. They were not allowing the Muslims to come and perform salah in the masjid, in al-Masjid al-Haram. And so as a result, the Prophet ﷺ, his life was in danger, and so what did he do? He migrated to Medina. And so if that becomes the situation in a certain country, a believer must make hijrah. Right? And the Quran actually even talks about it, that when a person was to use this excuse on the Day of Judgment, that the people around me prevented me from doing it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, Alam takun ardullahi wasi'a, that was the land of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, was it not vast enough for you? You had the ability to go, right? You had the ability to go, right? But just to, wrap it up, right? Yes, in essence, it is permissible to vote. You can go, and rather, I'm not going to say it's permissible, it's something I would recommend, go and vote, right? I think we as Muslims need to realize that we together, unified, hold a great deal of power and influence. We do. This is something that we need to be a little bit proud of to some extent, right? It's funny that sometimes I ask people, I was like, where are you from? Or like, what do you define yourself as? And they'll be like, oh, like, I'm Indian. And like, oh, they make this comment that we should be grateful that we were even allowed to come here. Like, what does that mean? Right? We're just as legal in this country. If we hold a Canadian citizenship, if we hold a visa and we're allowed to be in this country, we're just as legal to be in this country as anyone else. We're allowed to vote the same way they're allowed to vote. We're allowed to become a member of parliament just as much as they're allowed to become a member of parliament, right? And so this is something that we as Muslims, I think, need to come to realize. And it's something I think we haven't realized is the power that we have. Right? But essentially what I would say is this idea that you're putting someone in power and you're, aligning them or equating them to the legislator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think that's a big misunderstanding, right? In today's time, I'm not going to tell you who to vote for. Right? That's not what I'm going to do. They vote for Freeland or vote for Pierre, right? At this point, it's like what's the better of the two evils, really, right? Because what you take from one, right, that you can vote for the Liberal Party because they're good with the Muslims or, maybe where you're from or your ethnicity on certain aspects. But then when it comes to many points of Islam, they're also questionable. And then you also see the conservativeness of the Conservative Party, which obviously align with many things that we may believe in or we hold or our morals, but then we see their support of like Israel and those other things as well. So again, it comes down to what you would really believe, which benefits would outweigh the cons, etc. So I'm not gonna tell anyone who to vote for, but yes, it is permissible to vote, and rather go and vote. Make sure that your voice is heard, right? And this is something that we need Muslims to be involved in, anyways. And you guys just had yesterday, Brother Umair, a very, very, very good friend of mine, right? He's, mashallah, right? The TM's, the Canadian Muslim Vote, right? Mashallah, they're doing such good work, and I think he was probably one of the better people to speak on this topic to begin with, right? But it's something he'll tell you that we need Muslims to get involved in this regard and in this aspect, anyways. But yeah, that's just some food for thought, right? But this is generally what that topic is question. Why it's questioned, whether it's permissible or not, is because of that misunderstanding of the verse of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khair, Mufti. Very thorough answer. Any follow-up questions on this? Okay, in that case, we'll move on to the next question. So someone is asking that I take medication for mental struggles that can eliminate their feeling of hunger. And they feel like during Ramadan, they're worried that their fasting won't be counted because they're not going through any hardship in terms of like holding back from food. So are they allowed to continue taking this medication during Ramadan?
When it comes to any medication, firstly, obviously, a doctor should be consulted, whether this is something we can take before we need to stop eating, and if I'm allowed to not take that up until fasting time or breaking of the fast time sets in. Right? That's the first thing we have to try and do. Then it's also required to ascertain whether that medication is definitively required or not. Like, will it cause me harm if I wasn't? Right? And we'll probably see, I think there's a few questions with regards to what am I allowed to do when it comes to fasting, medication, etc. There's a certain guideline that we follow, right? And that is that when it comes to, and this is again same with the Shafi'i school, that when it comes to doing something while you're fasting that would potentially break it, consuming something, for example, like medication, it comes down to whether if you were not to take that, would you, number one, become sick? Would you become ill? Number two, you are already ill and not taking it will make you even worse. Number two. And number three is you are recovering and not taking that will prolong your recovering. It'll make it even longer than it should. 3 points which both the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school define when it comes to gauging whether something is allowed to be taken during the middle of the fast. Now, this person asked that I don't really feel like I'm holding back when I take this pill that helps me, suppress my hunger. I mean, within 3 days of Ramadan, you'll feel like that, right? Once your body gets used to it, you'll be like, let me fast for 2 days consistently and you'll be okay, right? So it's not only the medication. Alhamdulillah, this year the fasts are not as long as they used to be regardless. So in that regard, it's fine, right? I mean, if you need to take it and it's been ascertained by a doctor that you need to be taking it, then yes, it is fine, but try to first find out if it's something that you can avoid during the duration of the fast. If not, then you take these 3 points into consideration. Ideally, who's good to help with this is a Muslim doctor, right? A Muslim doctor who understands the importance of a fast, the month of Ramadan, and the sensitivity of a Muslim about that, right? Because if you go to another doctor who doesn't understand how that, like how important a fard is, right? And how important a fast of Ramadan is. There are many statements of the scholars in which they explain that like missing one fast in the month of Ramadan, you could spend the rest of your life doing nawafil fast, and it wouldn't be the same as doing that one Ramadan fast, right? And so if you've broken it or without a valid excuse, is something we have to be careful about. And so a Muslim doctor would understand that, the importance of that, and they'll be able to help you, come to a conclusion on whether that is something you really need or something you can probably get away with, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair, Mufti.
Jazakumullah.
Yes, Hussein.
Yes.
So if you were to go to a doctor and a Muslim doctor, and they were to determine that this medication is necessary, like you have to take it every 4 hours or something, so you have to take it while you're fasting, would it be that taking this medication is like a legal excuse and your fast is valid, or would it be that you are exempt from fasting and you have to make it up?
So here there's a difference of opinion, right? Some say that, look, you would do it now, and then during the shortest days of the year, when you can avoid having to even take that, you should redo those fasts. Right? So if, for example, right now it's 12 hours, and you can only get away with that for 8 hours, and then there's a time of the year where your fast is very short, and in 8 hours, you would make up and do qada of those fasts there. Some are of the opinion that you would still fast now, take it as you wish, and also give the fidya, just in case, especially if it's a chronic illness that's going to be for the rest of your life, right? Then you would give fidya as well. But ideally, it's first you have to ascertain all those, and if a person comes to that point where that's the case, they're unable to make qada of it at another time, then yes, they can also give fidya on top of it. But remember, they still have to do what? Tashabbuh bi-sa'imin. Right? Even during the day, regardless of what they've eaten, what they've consumed, whether it's medication or whether they intentionally broke their fast, they still have to continue the remainder of the fasting day as if they were a fasting person. Right? It's not like, in the middle of the day of my fast, I was like, all right, I can't do this, and I drank a bottle of water. And now my thirst has been satisfied, and so for the rest of the day, I'm going for a nice steak dinner. I can't do that while I'm still fasting. I still have to. It's wajib, according to the Hanafi school, to spend the remainder of the day doing tashabbuh, imitating the fasting person, as if you are a fasting person as well. Right? So you still have to continue doing that, even in that case.
Any other follow-ups? Yes, Abdul Wadud.
Do inhalers or eye drops count as medication that will break the fast?
They do not. They do not. Yeah. Inhalers. What else did you say?
Eye drops.
Eye drops. No. Nasal sprays potentially yes, because they reach the digestive tract. Injections do not. Blood tests do not. Insulin shots do not break the fast. Anything else that medically sometimes comes up? Yeah. IV is fine as well, no problem. Yeah. Why? All of those things do not reach what? The digestive tract. The digestive tract is 3 entrances, right? Those guys who were in, and there's a few brothers and sisters here who were in the Prep for Ramadan course that I was teaching, right? 3 entrances that reach the digestive tract. Your nose, your mouth, and your rear passage. 3 areas from where something will reach your digestive tract. And so if something is put in there through your mouth, through your nose, or through the rear passage, and it reaches the stomach, then it will break it. Injections don't do that. Eardrops don't do that. IVs do not do that. Blood tests do not do that. And so on. Good?
Okay. Next question. What is the ruling on reciting Surah Al-Fatiha behind the Imam when praying in congregation? This is both while the Imam is reciting out loud and during like the quiet parts, like in like the final 2 rak'ahs of like Aisha. Like when do you recite it? Anything about that?
I think this is what, the 4th maybe consistent week I've been asked this question. The last 3 weeks I think the sisters have been asking this question. Alhamdulillah. But all right, we'll start with the what should I start with? I'm gonna start with the Shafi'i school because I can say the Hanafi school last and seem like that's the more authoritative opinion. No, in books of fiqh the scholars do that, They'll mention all of the other schools first, and that's their theory, and they don't mention it. Like in many Hanafi books, if they're mentioning other schools, they'll mention all of those first, and then they'll mention the Hanafi opinion last, and talk about all of the points mentioned above and refute them, and then mention the Hanafi point last. But according to the Shafi'i school, it is wajib, right? You need to recite Surah Fatiha behind the Imam, whether the Imam is reciting loud or whether the Imam is reciting quiet, in all 4 of the in every single rak'ah. This is according to the Shafi'i school, right? Because they go according to the hadith which says, "La salata liman lam yaqra bi fatihatil kitab," that the salah does not count, or there's no salah for the person who doesn't recite bi fatihatil kitab, the opener of the kitab, which is Surah Fatiha. And that's why according to them, even Bismillah is necessary. Because the Shafis are of the opinion that what? Bismillah at the beginning of Surah Fatiha is part of Surah Fatiha. It's part of that ayah of the Quran. But the Hanafis say that no, Bismillah is part of the Quran somewhere, we just don't know where. Right? There is one specific part where it very clearly mentions Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim in the 19th juz. Right, you guys? In Surah An-Naml, yes. In the 19th juz. It's mentioned Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Right? And then besides that, they say that there's one before any one surah in the Quran where the Bismillah is part of that surah. That's why if you go to a Hanafi masjid, they'll only say Bismillah loud once. And it's probably on the first day when they're starting Surah Baqarah in Taraweeh. I'm talking about in Taraweeh. They'll start it and just say Surah Bismillah loud once on probably the first day. And if they forget, they'll do it some random day in the middle. Right? But according to the Shafi'i school, you recite Surah Fatiha even as you are a follower behind the Imam in all 4 of the rak'at. It is wajib, it's necessary for you to recite it. The only time in the Shafi'i school where you wouldn't recite it is what? Is if you start the salah and there's not enough time for you to recite the Fatiha before the Imam goes into ruku'. If you're going to miss the ruku' of the Imam, only then do you not recite the Fatiha and you go in. But even that, according to the Shafi'i school, there's a difference of opinion whether you need to make up that rak'at or not thereafter. Sheikh Zakaria will probably be the best person to ask what the dominant opinion is. According to the Hanafi school, very clearly, you do not recite anything behind the Imam. You do not recite Surah Fatiha, whether it's a loud salah, jahr salah, or whether it's a khafa salah, whether it's a quiet salah. The qira'ah or the Fatiha of the Imam is the Fatiha of the people behind. The hadith of Abdullah bin Umar, if I'm correct, which is that qira'atul imam qira'atun lah. That the qira'ah of the Imam is the qira'ah for the follower. And so the Imam's reciting Surah Fatiha and a surah, or if it's the last surah, it's only Surah Fatiha, which is sufficient for all those following behind the Imam as well. Right? And so that is both the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school. Anybody have follow-up questions on that one? Yes.
What other things like the thana or the takbir or those things you say those as
yes. So Hanafis, you'll say the takbir. This is important. When we start the salah and we're saying Allahu Akbar, you need to say it loud enough where you hear yourself. That one specifically, the takbiratul tahrim, you need to say it loud enough where you are able to hear yourself. Males and females. You need to be able to hear yourself. You're not saying it loud. And you recite the thana. Besides that, you do the adhkar. You don't recite Surah Fatiha, you don't recite Surah. In ruku' you say Subhan Rabbiyal Azim. In sujood you say Subhan Rabbiyal A'la. And in the qa'dah, while you're sitting, you recite the tahiyyat, right? You recite the durood, the salawat, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. And then after that, any dua. The dua generally according to the Hanafi school is Allahumma inni zalamtu nafsi dhulman kathira. Right? Or you can recite anything. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً اللَّهُمَّ اغْفِرْ لِي وَارْحَمْنِي, those type of things. But you do not recite the Fatiha or the Qur'an.
What about the other takbirah? Like if the imam says Allahu Akbar and goes into ruku, do I say it as well before going?
You don't need to. You don't need. Rather, you should actually stay quiet. Yeah.
And in the Hanafi madhab, what about the two last rak'at? So do they say the Fatiha
The followers do not. No matter what, you do not.
Kind of related. If you know how in the other madhab, because they have to recite Surah Fatiha, the imam will like take a pause after finishing Surah Fatiha and leave some time before starting the other one. In the Hanafi madhab, they won't do that. But if I'm praying by myself and I'm like, if I do take a pause for some reason, or if I'm thinking of what surah to recite next, is that fine, or does that count under like delaying?
Too much delay shouldn't happen. Yeah. Extensive delay, it may make your salah makruh. Yeah.
So if you're Shafi, do you follow while he's reciting, or do you follow what you see in your Fatiha after he finishes?
Shafi's, what's the rule? Who's Shafi here? When do you generally recite it? As the imam's reciting?
No. Either at the beginning or after he says it.
Yeah. They'll be better to answer that. Yes.
Okay. From what I understand is you read Surah Al-Fatiha. There's like a bit of
The pause.
right before. You don't read as fast as you can, but you make sure that you read it. The imam is not supposed to stop or wait until you're done, but you just have to make sure that you read it before you go to the floor.
Okay. Understood? There we go, mashallah.
Okay, we'll move on to the next question. So this is a bit of a follow-up to the previous question, in which we kind of covered that you can't recite the Quran when in a state of janaba. So what dhikr or ibadah should we do, especially in the month of Ramadan, when we can't fast or pray in this state?
So, I think the first thing that needs to be understood when it comes to women not being allowed to do recite Quran or perform salah, not being allowed to join Taraweeh, etc. in the month of Ramadan, all right? We have to understand and have true firm yaqeen and belief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward me in my abstinence from those things during that month. Just like there is reward for the male or for the woman that is not in her menses to fast, to recite Quran, to go to the masjid and do the Taraweeh, right? And do as much recitation of the Quran as they can. Right? Just like that, we have hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will reward the female who is unable to because of her menses and abstains from it because of that. She will be rewarded in the same manner. Her rule or her following of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's law is in not doing it just as much as it is for the guy, for example, to do it. Right? And so during that time, there's so many adhkar that they can do, right? The standard tasbih, subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu akbar, la ilaha illallah. Right? And then again, the du'as, parts of the Quran, they're allowed to recite it. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً. Right? They can listen to the Quran. It just can't be recited. They can listen to it. We can have things, they can listen to the Taraweeh, although they may not be able to join in on it. And they can listen to the Quran as well. This is the same even according to the Shafi'i school. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, there will be. Yeah, just like it won't be the same as reciting, no. Yeah. Yes. What is just so? I had this conversation with. They say that if they're a Quran teacher and they need to teach, then they can break up the words, right? So if it's like Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, she would say Alhamdu, take a break. Lillahi, stop. Rabbil, stop. Alameen. No one full verse together, if she really needs to teach it. Yeah. Good question. They usually have that. Right. And then it's like the other. On a similar line is that a person who's becoming a hafidha, for example, she's memorizing the Quran and she doesn't want to forget it, right? She can look at it and kind of go over it in her mind if she really needs to. But if she knows that she'll be okay in holding off for a few days without it, then she should do that. There may still be a little bit of dislike in her doing that. Yes.
Is there a sin if the female reads the Quran like fully, as like entire
In what? In salah, in your life? Like, what do you mean?
like when she's in like her
when she's in her purity. If like a person is just not reciting Quran
No, but if the person recites the Quran,
while she's impure, yeah, she would be sinful for it. Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So the next question is, what is the ruling on masturbation for someone who isn't married?
Oh, this is a topic where I did make some notes, and again, I think this is something that we, as like a Muslim community, have yet to acknowledge as being a major problem. And I think it's something we need to not only see as a religious problem, but also something we need to understand may, for many people, be a psychological problem. It may be an addiction for some people. Right? And so it may not be, right? We have to acknowledge, number one, that it exists, right? Just like anything else. Right? Just not talking about it or sweeping it under the rug doesn't help anyone. Right? Ignoring it, acting like it doesn't exist, it doesn't solve the problem for anyone. Right? And it's one thing I want to say that other religious groups, like if you look at the Christians, even if you look at the Jewish community, right? When there's a problem, many of them are quite active in addressing it. Right? They're outspoken about it. They will talk about it. They don't shy away from these topics. And there are many things, when they understand that this is like a community issue, a societal issue, they will come together and they will make some sort of effort to try and solve the problem. Right? They'll literally say like, yo, let's have like a town hall about this and let's speak about it. Right? Let's bring leaders if we can, people who have money, bring them over. Right? They try to get as many people who may be able to play a role in providing some sort of solution. They'll bring those people together and they'll work on it. Right? But like, unfortunately, I think this is one topic within the Muslim community where it's like ignorance is bliss, right? Like we just act like it doesn't exist, and whoever's suffering just suffers on their own, and they may suffer with it through the rest of their lives, even while they're married, causing problems in their, in their sexual life with their wives, with their family. Like it just leads to more and more problems, just ignoring it, right? And unfortunately, it's an approach we take to so many issues. Why? Because sometimes we just see it, especially from many other, if our families come from other societies, right, or from other countries, right, they may just give us an answer that, pray this dua and you'll be fine. And I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm not saying it doesn't work, but for sometimes we have to understand that it may not just be a religious issue. It may be a psychological issue. It may be an addiction, right? So the first thing we have to obviously understand that yes, it's a sin in Islam. Right? The Prophet ﷺ in a hadith very clearly says, "Nakihul yadi mal'oon," right? That the person who's pretty much done nikah with his hand. What does it mean? That fulfills their desires with their hand, male or female, mal'oon, they're cursed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's in a sahih hadith from the Prophet ﷺ, right? And so, first thing we must understand that yes, it is obviously a sin in Islam, but it's not merely a religious issue here. That you could just give a religious remedy, a hadith or something, and it's like, yes, our hands are washed, the problem is solved. Absolutely not, right? This is, I would say, for majority people, right, who are suffering this, it is at its core an addiction. And we must treat it as such. Right? We have to treat it in that manner. Right? Because, like, what do you have to do with addiction? How many different factors do we have to address when you're dealing with something as an addiction as opposed to something that is just like a religious issue? Right? There's so many other things. Number one, you have to address your own behaviors. You have to address your own surroundings. You have to identify your own personal triggers. There's so many, and I can go down a list of like ways that we can avoid triggers. But again, that's not 100% the solution, right? We have to realize that it starts from here. Because a lot of times it doesn't always require a physical trigger, right? Like it doesn't require me to have seen something immoral on my phone for me to now develop that desire to want that rush of dopamine and then to fulfill it in that wrong, sinful manner. It may not just be, for some people it becomes so difficult, they'll just be sitting, doing anything and something will start raising, the pressure will start coming up. And they start feeling a certain way. Why? Because it's become an addiction, right? Like somebody who's smoking cigarettes, somebody who has an alcohol issue, right? What happens? It's not when they see another cigarette that they start to feel something. They could be doing nothing. They'll be in the middle of reciting Quran, they'll be in the middle of salah, and they'll be like, I'm craving a cigarette. Right? It's why? It's become an addiction. It's something that their body has become adapted to. It's something that their minds have become adapted to, right? And so, and we have to understand that this is obviously from a certain degree, yes, it is the whispers of shaitan. Right? This is what we know as the waswasa of shaitan. Right? Sometimes you're just sitting and you get this thoughts and whispers of doing something bad. Right? But you also have the opposite. You ever just, have this like inclination to do good? Sometimes you're sitting and just like, you know what, let me go recite some Quran. Or let me go do this, let me go do this. Right? The scholars, they mention, and the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in a hadith, that this is known as lammatul malak. Lammatul malak, right? It's something that we believe in. It's like, just as we have the whispers of shaitan, we also have like this push from the malaika. Malak is the singular form of malaika, an angel. It's like their push and their desire for you to do something good, right? And this is something we need to be wary about, we need to be aware of. That when we get these desires to do good and it's coming from the angels, we should try to act upon it if we can, lest these things stop. Lest the angels stop doing it or stop giving us these, little pushes because we're no longer taking, that bait, as you would say, right? And so the same way is shaitan has these tricks as well. Right? And so the idea here is that, again, it's not sufficient, to just avoid the triggers. Yes, it definitely helps, right? But if we understand it, and if it's set in as an addiction, there needs to be some sort of mental rewiring that needs to happen. And for that, you may need to go to a therapist. You may need to go to a scholar who is also well versed in that. Right? I'm so happy this is here. Right? They have a lot of options for people who suffer from this. Muslims in private settings, with being anonymous, right? And so it's something that, alhamdulillah, Islam has been, on top of providing these type of, options for many people who suffer from these things, because they are seeing that for many people it's ruining their lives. It is ruining their lives. Masturbation, generally, how is it fulfilled? It's through watching something that is immoral. It's generally through pornography. Right? And somebody who is involved in that will tell you, and people who have experienced that before will tell you, that it came to the verge of potentially ruining my life, ruining my relationship with my spouse, with my family. Right? It caused lots of friction between myself and my spouse. They will tell you this. And so there needs to be this sort of mental rewiring that needs to happen. Right? And then yes, obviously, limit yourself and identify the triggers. Right? If it's my phone, when I am using my phone and I'm in a setting where me on my phone could potentially lead me to doing something, I should relocate myself. Let me go to a place where there's people around. Like if I'm in my room and I'm on my phone, it may lead me to do something I shouldn't be doing. But if I'm in the living room and my parents are there next to me, and if I'm scrolling through and I see something, am I going to stop and take an extra few seconds on that? Or because my mom or my dad is sitting next to me, I'll go through. Right? I'll continue. And so we have to identify what the triggers are and put, things in place, instructions or certain things in place in order for us to be able to prevent ourselves from these things, right? And so there are many things. We may need to limit our screen time. We may need to put blockers on our own phones, right? So for many people doing this, ideally, it would be best to connect yourself with somebody who understands how to deal with addictions, who understand the Sharia, and in light of the Hadith, and in light of the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, in light of the Quran and the Sunnah, inshallah. Right? So again, I'm not here to just mention the basic standard triggers and what to do. I wanted to kind of discuss it for us to truly understand that this is something that we as a community need to come together to try and provide solutions for people who are suffering from this. Because I can tell you it's a lot more common than you can think of. Right? My last point that I'll mention is, when I was studying and doing my IFTA course, right? For those who know, right, you have online the Ask Imam website, right, of my teacher, Mufti Ibrahim Desai rahimahullah, well over 40,000 questions answered on that website. You know, we had a daily limit of questions that would be allowed to come in. When I tell you that majority of questions are with regards to, or like a lot of the questions, at least one or two a day coming in have to do with something like this, with masturbation and the whispers of shaitan. I'm unable to control myself, right? It's a very, very common issue. And so we need to understand that this is something that we as a community need to come together, address it, make it something that people are able to speak up about and find help and seek help, and they have the resources to get help if they need to, inshallah. Right? So just some things to think about.
Any follow-ups?
Yes. No, it's haram according to every single school of fiqh. There is just Imam Ahmad's one very rare opinion where he says that if a person is literally on the verge of committing an even more immoral act, which would be what? Which would be zina, and doing this would prevent and would drop that or bring down that desire immediately, and they were to do it, only then they would have permission to do so, but otherwise very strictly, married, unmarried, it doesn't matter. It is impermissible and it is haram.
Okay.
Yes.
For the next question, what is the ruling for women attending the Eid prayer? Is it mandatory?
Oh, yes.
Sorry, I just had a follow-up question. So if you seek therapy for something like masturbation, would you get a sin for exposing your sin?
No, like that. I think if we're not addressing it and we're only gonna continue doing it, it's just gonna make things even worse, right? And so when you're doing something as tough as it may be, and as wrong as it may seem, but it's eventually going to help you, right? And it's happening. This is, again, it's an illness. Right? We're literally considering an illness. And when something is ill and you require remedy for it, even those things which would generally be impermissible in certain scenarios become permissible. I think this is very similar to that scenario, right? Where without help, I'm probably not going to stop. And so if that means I need to expose myself to one specialist who helps in that regard, and they are bound by confidentiality, which most people are, right? When they are therapists, then it's fine.
Any other follow-ups? Okay, so the next question was, is it mandatory for women to attend the Eid prayer?
It is not mandatory for women to attend the Eid prayer. According to both the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school, it is not mandatory for them to attend the Eid prayer. It is not mandatory for them to attend the Jumu'ah prayer. Yes, they are allowed to go. If they wish to, yes, do not prevent them from going either, right? Obviously, arrangements should be made so that it is segregated and they have their own area, right? And it shouldn't just be leave them a little corner in the back, right? No, right? Give them that space, and things should be facilitated for them nicely as well, right? And some masjids may not always be the most mindful of that, and it's something that they should be encouraged to do so, and it's something they should not prevent the sisters from doing so as well. But they are permitted to come, but it is not obligatory. If they decide to stay at home, they're perfectly fine to stay at home, and they do not need to make qada or make up for the Eid prayer. Whereas for Jumu'ah, if they're not performing Jumu'ah, then they will perform Dhuhr Salah. Yes. According to the Hanbali school, I know they say that if Eid is on a Friday, then the Eid will suffice for the Jumu'ah. According to the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school, from what I am pretty sure according to the Shafi'i school, no, you'll still pray the Jumu'ah as well. Yeah. Yes?
Simple question. So I know sometimes it's recommended for women to pray at home. If we prayed in congregation, we still get the reward?
If you prayed in congregation, we still get the reward, yes.
So is it okay, like even if we get more rewards praying at home or in congregation?
Congregation at the masjid?
Yeah, like if you're with everyone.
So this is based on a few factors, right? If their haya or their modesty is safe in making their way to the masjid, etc., then yes, if they come to the masjid and they perform it, they have the great amount of reward in that as well. If those things are in question, it's better for them to stay at home, and that would be more rewarding, right? Although both are perfectly okay for them to go and do. Yeah.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question. So, when you are a traveler, can you choose whether or not you want to shorten your prayers and miss fasts, or is it mandatory to do so? And just a small request, could you try to raise your voice as much as possible?
Okay. Yeah.
Jazakallah khair.
According to the Shafi'i school, being allowed to, what is it, shorten your prayers?
Yes.
Okay. I thought it might be joining of the prayers. Being allowed to shorten your prayers depends on the intention of your travel. Right? If you are traveling, okay, first of all, it's the distance, right? It has to be either 77 kilometers, according to one opinion, or 88 kilometers, right? 48 miles, roughly. If your intention is to go to do something haram, the Shafi'i school says you are not allowed to shorten your prayers. This was a laxity in the rule from 4 to 2, but you're using that leeway to go and do something haram. So you're not given that rukhsa, right? And so they say that you're not allowed if your intention is haram. But if it's mubah and it's permissible or you're going for a good thing, then yes, you're allowed to shorten your prayers. Right? But it is your choice. In the Shafi'i school, it is your choice. Even if your intention is good and you wish to perform the full 4, according to the Shafi'i school, you can pray the full 4 in the Shafi'i school. That's their difference. Halal permissible travel or impermissible travel. Right? That will be when it's allowed or not allowed. And in the case when it is allowed, it's up to you if you want to shorten it. If you wish to pray the full 4, you're allowed. In the Hanafi school, your intention of travel doesn't matter. Whether you're going for something haram, whether you're going for something makruh, whether you're going for something permissible, right? It doesn't matter. But what matters but the Hanafi school says that once you are considered a legal traveler, it is necessary for you to shorten your prayer. Right? In the Hanafi school, there's something known as azima and rukhsa. Rukhsa is that sort of laxity which is given as choice, and azima is some sort of laxity which you are required to do. And according to Imam Abu Hanifa, the shortening of the prayer is something you are required to do. Right? And so when you are traveling, no matter what you're going for, even if you're going to downtown Toronto for the most wrong reasons, right, you are still required to shorten your prayers as you are going. Right? 4 will become 2. Many people ask that, I mistakenly read 4. Right? So long as you sat in the second rak'ah, you will not be required to repeat your salah. But intentionally, you cannot read 4. If you do, you'll have to repeat your salah and make it 2. Right? If you're aware that you're supposed to be reading 2, you must read 2. Yes, I think there was a follow-up.
But if you go to if you travel, let's say to the other side of the world, but you're going to your dad's house, and you don't have a husband, that's your house, you pray 4th.
It depends. There's a few things now. Number 1 is what is considered your actual home, right? You have a term called the watan asli, like your personal home, your like main primary residence, as we say, right? Like you guys are here on campus, but your home, the moment you're done this 1-2 years, your home is maybe in Toronto, maybe in Saskatchewan. It doesn't, right? That is your watan asli. If you're traveling and you're in a place for more than 15 days, then you'll be considered a resident of that area, temporary residence. Right? Now we're getting into the rules of traveling overall. The distance of 77, if your intention is for 15 days or not. Then you have to figure out where you're going. Is that place your home or is it a place of visitation? Right? Technically, you being on campus and your parents have a home and that is your regular home, you being on campus is not your watan asli. You'll have to see whether you're going to be here for 15 days or not. Yeah, it's important. Yeah. Especially now, if we know, it should be something that we think about and try to figure out. Yes?
Okay, so the rest of us who live away from home, home is technically Toronto over the limit in Jamaica. If I go home for 2 days and I come back, I stay for like 2-ish weeks, which is like 10-ish days, I guess. I live here, I live there.
If you're here for 10 days, you're praying 2.
Just to repeat the follow-up, for those who are living outside the boundary on campus, but they go back every weekend.
Yeah. Right? If I live in Toronto and I even visit every 10 days for 1 day, every 10 days I am here because my intention is not 15 days, I am considered a traveler. And I will perform 2 rak'ah. Yes.
Another regarding traveling, if I'm traveling and I join a Jamaat late, when I'm making up, do I make up the full amount or do I make up the short
Yeah.
amount?
If the imam is a resident and he's performing 4 and you've joined him, his niyyah is your niyyah, you need to pray for. It's only if you're on your own or you're the imam and you're leading that you would then be required to follow that.
Just for the record, the follow-up was about joining a jama'ah late when you are traveling.
Yeah. You know, this is something that when I was studying in madrasa, it used to happen so often. We were in the UK and we were in Blackburn, which is the north of the UK. And we had a lot of students from the madrasa that were from London, right? And so they would travel every couple of weeks sometimes, and they would come to madrasa, and they wouldn't know that they're musafir, right? They wouldn't know that they're a traveler, and they would then perform the salah, and they would have led all 4 rakats. And then we'll get an announcement on the speaker an hour later, oh, Imam was a traveler, he was only performed 2 rakats, everybody come down and repeat, right? So it was always happening for us. Yeah.
Uh,
It's optional.
And if you miss some prayer while traveling, and you're making it up as a resident, what do you pray?
You pray it as a traveler. 2. Salahs which are missed as you're traveling will be made up for after, even if you've now become a resident back in your hometown, your home, you will make it up as if you're traveling. 2 only.
Yes, Siba?
Yes. About shortening it? No, the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school, I've confirmed of. I'm not sure about the Maliki school and the Hanbali school. Yeah. Yes.
So the distance, you said 77 or 88?
77 or 88, depends on.
Is there like specific school of thought, or is it just
So this is not just a specific school of thought issue. This comes down to what is understood as the 48 miles. Okay, so what we have to understand where this number comes from. I think this is important, right? Just very quickly, 2 minutes. The hadith of the Prophet ﷺ says that whoever travels for 3 days and 3 nights is considered a musafir, and so they must shorten their salah. 3 days and 3 nights. Now the scholars in their time, they tested that according to the conveyance that the Prophet ﷺ would have had and the Sahaba what they had, if they were to travel at moderate speed, at moderate times, obviously not continuous 72 hours of traveling, with resting, with food, etc. If they were to travel, it would be 48 miles. Right? Now the question comes, are they 48 American miles or are they 48 Shari'i miles? That's where the 77 comes from. 77 kilometers is 48 American miles, roughly, 76 point something I think. And then the 48 Shari'i miles, religious miles, which is a little bit longer, comes out to 88. Right? Whichever one you follow, just be consistent with it. Right? If you're asking me, I go with 88. Yeah, I stick with the 88 amount. It's something that my teachers always followed. Many of my colleagues, they follow that as well.
Okay.
I think there's one
just
more
for this, just for the sake of time, there's a lot of follow-ups to
Okay,
this question,
all right.
but I think we want to get through the other questions.
Sounds good.
To the fasting part, because it was a 2-part.
Right.
Oh, yes. So would you be... The thing with fasting is both according to the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school, the only way fasting is an option when you are traveling is if you've already started your travel before Fajr. You understand? If you've already started, for the day of, if I've left Waterloo before Fajr, if I live in Waterloo, for example, and I've left Waterloo before Fajr, and my intention is Montreal, only if I've started my travel before Fajr, before the fasting time even starts, do I have the option to not fast, right? And then while I'm traveling, so long as it's under 15 days, I'm only going to Montreal for 10 days. Those 10 days in Montreal, I'm allowed to not fast if I don't want to. Right? And again, this is a choice. The fasting part is a choice according to both the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school. It is better, obviously you'll be more rewarding to fast, even if you're traveling.
Okay, perfect. We'll move on to the next question. Just for the sake of time, we'll try to answer these questions a bit more quickly so we can get through all the questions we have submitted.
Apologies.
No worries. So the question is it halal to work for a private equity firm?
It's a very broad question. I won't be able to definitively say yes or no. It depends on the nature of the job itself, right? Private equity firm, investment bank, investment firms, very similar. It depends on the nature of the job, right? Like, I can work as a cleaner in a bank. Does that make my job halal or haram? It would be perfectly fine. I can work as a teller in a bank, something that people generally don't know. Yes, working as a teller in a bank is permissible, according to the Hanafi school. I'm not going to comment on the Shafi'i school. According to Imam Abu Hanifa's principles of figuring out whether a job is halal or not, it would be permissible. The reason why these questions are asked is, like, I could be doing something completely halal in a haram or some sort of haram environment, partial haram environment, like a bank, or let's say a private equity firm which is investing in like alcohol or in pork, etc. But they may also have certain halal investments as well. Right? And so any job, there's two principles we must look at in any job. Number one is the job itself, the description of what I am doing. Is that halal? Is that permissible? Right? Am I slaughtering pigs? Right? Am I dealing with pork? That itself would be haram. I'm not even allowed to deal with it. I'm not allowed to cut it. I'm not allowed to pack it. I'm not allowed to do a lot of that. Is that itself? Am I doing something haram? Number one. And then number two is where is the fund of my remuneration coming from? When I'm being paid, that fund, that pool of money, where does that money come from? Those two things are generally the two factors in it. So whenever anybody does ask about a job, I do ask for full clarification on the job description itself, and then a bit more information on the company. So again, working in a private equity firm would depend on the position and probably on many of the investments of that private equity firm to begin with. Yes?
Does this also apply to industries outside of just money? Like, for example, if the products I'm working on for my company may be sold in like defense or like arms applications.
Yeah.
It would principles apply?
Yeah, so again, this is actually, then you're getting into very technical ones. It depends on whether you're in Muslim lands or non-Muslim lands, whether their income is more than 50% halal or not. It would depend on a lot of those factors. So we generally do require complete specifications before any judgment is given or any fatwa is given on a specific position.
Okay. We'll move on to the next question then. This is a bit of a longer one. It has a lot of context. So this is about the permissibility of sleepovers, and the context is this person has a friend that lives away from their family and they're studying abroad, and their parents trust them to follow the rules and they're fairly disciplined. But they're usually not allowed to sleep over at other people's places except for family members' houses who their parents trust. Now the concern is they've been going to this person's house to sleep over, and they have a room that's separate from the father's living space, but there's no lock on the door. The father still respects and abides by the boundaries, and they don't enter while she is over, and he keeps to himself. He doesn't interact with her as much. But recently, she's been concerned that she's been committing a sin by sleeping at the house without her parents' knowledge or approval. And the person who is asking this question did some research, and they want to know whether or not it's permissible for this person to sleep over at this person's house, given that the father is not a mahram and they live in the same house. And what is like kind of the ruling based on this context?
Yeah. I mean, number one, she should probably get permission from her wali, which is probably her father. Speak to them, and she says that she trusts their parents trust her and her judgment. So she should get permission, number one, from her parents or her father, which is her wali. And as long as that's given, then in aspect of that specific house, it seems like measures have been put in place, and there is this understanding that there should be minimal interaction for people between the non-mahrams of this lady and the father, for example, that is in that house, understands that there is a guest here with my daughter, and I shouldn't be barging into her room. I mean, I think that's something that they shouldn't be doing regardless. But yeah, I think that's fine. If they were to have that sleepover, that's not a problem. I think, understood? Yeah. So long as she has permission and she has the general idea, or her husn or ghalabatu dhan, her predominant thought is that yes, I should be fine here and nothing haram will potentially happen, then it's not a problem. Yes.
So you said permission, you mean of her own parents?
Yes, of her own parents. She should have permission from her wali, right? That she's going to somebody else's house. Yeah.
Okay. For the next question, the person asks, can a woman go for Umrah in a group without a mahram?
Oh, okay. According to the Hanafis, no. Right? According to the Shafi'is also, no. According to the Malikis, no. According to the Hanbalis, no. Right? There's an article I can share which goes through almost all of the views. The only schools that make mention of permissibility of a woman going for pilgrimage, and they restrict it only to Hajj. They don't even say Umrah. Right? Imam Nawawi has from the Shafi'i school, probably one of the most famous scholars of the Shafi'i school, has given a very lengthy discussion of it in his Sharh of Sahih Muslim, right, where he mentions that only if and when they are going for Hajj, and she is going with a group where she is completely in aman, she is completely safe, and it's a large group of females, then only for Hajj have they given some sort of leeway, yet he still says it is disliked. As well as Imam Ahmad, according to one of his opinions, has allowed it. Otherwise, the mainstream opinion is that no, they are not allowed to travel without a mahram, even if it's to the blessed lands, unless it is for Hajj, and that too only according to the Shafi'i and Hanbali school, and even the Hanbali school according to one opinion, Imam Ahmad. Right? And so standard is generally they are not allowed. The Hanafi school and the Maliki school are quite strict on this, with no exceptions. Yes, technically, yes, that is what needs to be done according to the Hanafi school, Maliki school. Yes, there have been recent opinions of many scholars that modern day modes of transportation are completely safe, and they start giving their wisdoms. This is where we have to truly understand the difference between legal reasoning and legal wisdoms, right? Rules are based on legal reasonings, not based on legal wisdoms, right? So even if those wisdoms change, right, it doesn't change the ruling because we're going according to the legal reasoning. Let me give you an example, right? The legal reasoning for alcohol to be haram, reasoning is what? Is it intoxicates you for alcohol and wine. The legal wisdoms is what? Is that it may make you do something haram, you lose your mind, you forget about the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you may do something you shouldn't be doing. Okay, those are the wisdoms. If somebody says that I'm going to drink a bottle of whiskey and I'm going to lock myself in my room until I'm sober, all the legal wisdoms, all those problems have been solved. Is it still permissible? No, because the legal reasoning is still there. Which is what? Which is that he is or she is intoxicated. And so that's why it is still impermissible. The legal reasoning when it comes to a woman not being allowed to travel is what? Is the distance. The moment the hadith says that a woman should not travel 3 days or 3 nights except with a mahram. So the moment they reach that 77 kilometers or 88 kilometers, that is the reasoning. That amount, that measure of 77 kilometers automatically initiates the rule that she needs to have a mahram. All of the other things that, it is because it is not safe. In the time of the Prophet ﷺ, there was highway robbers, there was this, there was that. Those are all the legal reasonings. Legal wisdoms. So even if all of those are somehow solved, and we say that, she's dropped off at the airport, and the airport, there's security everywhere, that still doesn't take away from the legal reasoning, which is the distance amount. And so it is still required for her to have a mahram. So again, it's a must understand legal reasonings, illah and hikmah. There's a difference between the two. Fiqh is based on illahs, reasonings, not on wisdoms. Wisdoms can change.
Okay. The next question is, for a woman making wudu, can she wipe over her hijab? Is that permissible?
According to the Hanafi school, quarter of the head must be wiped. Hair. And after that, once that's done, you can wipe over your hijab as much as you want. You can wipe over your amama as much as you want. But quarter of the head must be wiped. According to the Shafi'i school, yes. They allow for masah to be done over the amama for the male and over the hijab for the female, but a portion of the head must be done, even if it's 1 or 2 fingers, they say. I confirm this with Sheikh Zakaria. He says that isbu'ain, right? That a finger or 2 fingers must be wiped of the actual head before you actually do the masa over your hijab. So even if you were to just do your forehead, 2 fingers, and then you were to wipe over your hijab, according to the Shafi'i school, yes, it's allowed because of the many hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The Hanafi says no, miqdar rubu' rats, quarter of the head, masa ala rubu' rats is required over the quarter of the head.
Yes. Rehan?
No. Wiping of the neck, it is a mustahab part, right? The neck is fine. The throat is something that they shouldn't do. The scholars are very specific about it, that the throat is not mentioned anywhere from the Prophet ﷺ. And so they actually, many say that it's a bid'ah to start wiping your throat. The neck is fine. The neck, we find in certain hadith, although the Prophet ﷺ didn't always do it. But it is mustahab, it is preferred to do it because the Prophet ﷺ did do it on certain occasions. Yes, exactly. Just don't do the throat, this part, yeah.
Okay. For the next question, and this has a bit more context. So this person asking, is it permissible for them to break their fast when they get a migraine? And the reason they're asking is they have a disorder. It's not life-threatening, but it's very debilitating, where if they don't take their medication for their migraine right at the onset, they're bedridden for a few days. And during this time, it's difficult for them to work, focus on salah, especially to certain actions of the salah become very painful and exhausting. And the other difficulty with this as well is if they wait until iftar to take the medication, they end up vomiting anything they eat, and that causes difficulties as well. And it's best for the medication to be taken as soon as the symptoms begin. So would it be permissible to break the fast in order to take the medication?
I think this is a great example based on the principles I said earlier, right? It'll make you ill, you're already ill and it'll make you worse, or it'll prolong your becoming better. Right? This person very clearly said, if I don't, I'll become bedridden for a few days. Right? So just go to a Muslim doctor or try to find out from a mufti who may have contacts with a Muslim doctor to confirm that this is a valid excuse. And if that's the case, then yeah, it should be fine. Again, this is a case-by-case scenario. This one does seem to be quite severe. Does seem to be severe enough where if they are required to do it, they would be legally absolved. Yes, effort should be made that outside of Ramadan. Once maybe the days are a little bit shorter, and there's a higher likelihood will they be able to complete the fast, that they do make up for the fast. Yeah.
Okay. The next question is about during the Jumu'ah khutbah. So when the khatib is giving the khutbah, is it okay for people who come late to still pray the 2 rak'ah while the imam is giving the khutbah? Or is it better to instead listen attentively to the khutbah?
According to both the Shafi'i school and the Hanafi school, I spoke to Sheikh Zakaria, once the imam is on the pulpit, on the minbar, فَلَا صَلَاةَ وَلَا كَلَامٍ. There's no salah, there's no speaking. You don't speak. It is makruh to do so. Right? According to the Hanafi school, the khutbah is wajib. It is necessary for you to listen to the khutbah, to sit properly, to not move. Even if somebody is disobeying the laws of it, you should not even tell them anything. Right? You perform, you just sit there and listen to the khutbah. The 2 rak'ats that they're talking about are tahiyyatul masjid. When you come in, according to the Shafi'i school, it's, I think, wajib. Or it is necessary, or it is sunnah. It is sunnah, a strong, emphasized sunnah, that when they come into the masjid, they should do 2 rak'ats before they do anything else. Right? According to the Hanafi school, it is a sunnah, but it's not an emphasized sunnah. So if you don't do it, it's fine. Right? And so many, according to some others, like the Hanbali school, they see it as like necessary. You have to do it. And so many times you'll find that certain brothers will, as the khutbah is going on, will perform the 2 rak'ats. It's because maybe according to Imam Ahmad, it is required. Right? But confirming with Sheikh Zakaria and knowing from the Hanafi school, once the imam is on the minbar, then you don't perform your 2 rak'ats. Yeah.
One of our other shuyukh suggested that if you have arrived late to a khutbah and the imam the khatib has already started, before when you haven't entered the musalla or the masjid, outside somewhere there, pray your 2 and then come in. Would that be okay, or does that count as you're missing more of your?
Yeah, I think according to the Hanafi school, because that salah is a sunnah, right, and not even a extremely emphasized sunnah, and the khutbah is wajib, your stopping to do something sunnah and delaying the wajib. Go straight inside, right? And that, according to the Hanafi school, is because of Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha nudiya lis-salati min yawmil jumu'ah fas'au ila dhikrillah. Then hasten towards the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And according to many mufassirun, dhikrillah refers to the khutbatul jumu'ah. Yeah.
If there's a bit of room left and you can move over to let someone sit down, should you move over or should you wait until?
If you can shift over, yeah, it's fine. Yeah. Just don't speak. فَلَا صَلَاةَ وَلَا كَلَامٍ.
Maybe add the follow-ups to the form in that case. So that we will get to it if we can, inshallah. So the next question is concerning finding the last third of the night. How do we determine what time the last third of the night begins based on like the modern clocks? Especially for like tahajjud and praying.
Yeah. Simple. Sunset, Fajr, beginning time of dawn. Right? So pretty much the time that you stop eating for a fast. If Salah or if Maghrib sunset was at, let's say, 7 o'clock, right? And Fajr time sets in at, 7, 5, let's say Fajr time sets in at 5 a.m., right? You've got, 10 hours. So divide that by 3. The last 3 hours and 33 minutes is your third portion of the night. That is when it is sunnah more rewarding to pray your tahajjud, to actually sleep before that, wake up, perform some tahajjud, and pray your witr last. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Okay.
The next question, is it permissible for a woman to take some sort of medication in order to prevent her period from coming, as long as it doesn't harm her in any way? And I guess the person asking this question wants to know for the goal of preserving the last 10 nights of Ramadan.
Taking these type of medications, both according to the Hanafi school and the Shafi'i school, is disliked. It is makruh. But if they did take it and their cycle has not yet started, then yes, they will be required to fast if that's the case. But should you take it, medically everybody should find out. I can tell you that people who do take it, it very, very much does mess up many females' cycles for the next many, many months, right? I think I've mentioned it before that I think one of the most difficult aspects of fiqh is not even like inheritance laws, it's hayd laws, right? The laws surrounding a woman's menstrual cycles, they get very, very complicated, especially if sisters are not tracking their monthly cycles. When there's confusion, it can make it very difficult for them and very difficult for muftis to ascertain whether these are considered days of her purity or days of actual bleeding. Most people who take these medications, the next 3 or 4 cycles become completely out of order. They'll have random days of blood spotting, and it can really make them feel very, different. Again, I'm not a doctor, but this is just from the many, many, questions about menstruation that I have answered. Yes.
So even if you go for a Hajj, it's still disliked? Because I know for Hajj you
Yeah.
The
It is still disliked. It is still disliked. Yeah, okay.
And just for the record, the follow-up was about even for Hajj.
Right. Many people do take it for Hajj and for Umrah. For Umrah, I think it's just something that still the dislike would be there. Why? Because Umrah can be moved back and forth. Umrah is not farud, right? So this is something that dislike would still be there. For Hajj, because it's so difficult in today's time, your days are so limited, your visas are so restricted. If somebody does take it, especially when they know that it's going to happen, then yes, it would be fine. Again, speak to a doctor. That's the first thing I can say, because they really mess with hormones, and yeah, it can get quite bad for certain people. But it is permissible with dislike, according to both the Shafi'i school and the Hanafi school. I think the question was specific to fasting, so that they can fast in the month of Ramadan. I don't think that dislike would, be voided. It would still be disliked for them to do so.
I think I was actually, the focus was more on the last 10 nights specifically.
Yeah, meaning that they want to take it so that they can make the most of the last 10 nights,
Yeah.
right? Most of the last 10 nights can still be made even without it. Why? Because they can still do their adhkar. They can still sit there and make dua, right? Many of it, yes, they may not be able to recite Quran, they may not be able to perform salah, but the other acts of ibadah and worship and dhikr are still optional and available for her to do. And remember, again, her not doing prayer, her not reciting the Quran, since it is an injunction of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the Prophet ﷺ, there is reward in that for her.
The next question is, are we allowed to follow along with the translation of the Quran while it's being recited during Taraweeh? Especially if this helps with like maintaining focus in the Salah, given how much longer they are compared to some of the normal prayers.
Yeah, so the question is pretty much saying that can we stand with like a mushaf, with a Quran, or with my phone, for example, to follow along what's being recited in Taraweeh? According to the Hanafi school, no leeway for that. You cannot. Why? If I'm sitting there like this, right? The rule according to the Hanafi school is that any action which would make an onlooker think without any prior knowledge, would make an onlooker think that you are not performing your salah, would break it, right? So if I'm sitting there like this, going through, and somebody walks in, they're going to come in and be like, yo Mufti, what are you saying? They'll be like, yo, he's just on his phone. He's not in salah, right? So according to the Shafi'i school, they say the ruling is what? 3 harakat mutawaliya. 3 movements consistently would then break your salah. So they say that yes, having a mushaf in your hand is okay. Having a phone in your hand to follow along, according to the Shafi'i school, is okay. Approved and concurred by Sheikh Zakaria Abdul Aziz. If you have any questions, he will be the best person. And even if you follow up, and I can find out from him. But according to the Shafi'i school, yes. Right? Because of the principle of what breaks your salah. Yes, Abdul Wadud.
I'm hearing these opinions from different madhab. How do I know which one I can take? Can I pick and choose between them? Let's say, for the phone issue, I'll take the Shafi'i, and for the Hayyim, I'll take the Hanafi, or for anything else.
Maybe we save this for the end. I feel like this is a bigger question, not exactly a follow-up.
I was going to say not allowed.
The next question is about combining prayers while traveling. So when exactly do you do this? Do you pray Asr at Dhuhr or Dhuhr at Asr? Do you pray Asha at Maghrib and Maghrib at Isha? And what conditions do you have to meet in order for you to be able to combine prayers?
According to the Hanafis, making life easy, not allowed. Perform your salah at its designated time. There's no concept of joining the prayers outside of its designated times. Dhuhr must be prayed in its time. Asr must be prayed in its time. Maghrib in its time. Isha in its time. According to the Shafi'i school, yes, you are allowed to combine prayers, Dhuhr and Asr, in either Asr time or even in Dhuhr time. It doesn't matter. And Maghrib and Isha, either in Maghrib time or in Isha time, it doesn't matter. They allow for it on condition of the intention of that travel. To combine prayers is allowed when? In the Shafi'i school, if you're traveling the distance, which is 77 or 88, and only if your intention of travel is a permissible intention of travel. Then you are given the leeway and the laxity to what? Combine your prayers. And you can do so by joining Dhuhr and Asr in either or's time and Maghrib and Isha in either or's time. There's no specifications on how and when. Yeah. Cool? Yes. The only time Jama' bayna salatayn, the combining of prayers is allowed, is in Arafah, in the days of Hajj, and in Muzdalifah. That is it. And that too, many Hanafi fuqaha have conditioned it only with the Imam. By Imam, I mean the Khalifa, the leader of the Muslims. Right? And so the only time Jama' bayna salatayn is allowed in the Hanafi school is in the days of Hajj, in Arafah, and in Muzdalifah, and that is it.
Okay.
Yes.
We'll maybe add follow-ups to the queue. We'll try to get through the next questions. Sorry about that. The next question is, if my bank account is technically all student loans, am I still allowed to donate that to charity?
If my bank account is all student loans. Well, I mean, if it's a halal loan, I mean, the money itself that's coming is halal, right? If I get money from OSAP, that money is halal. Let's understand this. Even if I go to a bank and I get a interest-bearing loan, which is haram, the money that is transferred to my account, that money itself is halal. And so I can give it in whatever I want. I can give it in charity, I can make an investment, and the money I get from... Yes, the fact that the agreement I made, that is haram, and I'll be sinful for it. But that doesn't pollute the money itself. Right? Like if somebody gave me a $5 bill, and they're like, you owe me $6 when you give this back, that, like, I can't use that to wipe myself, because like it's haram now, it's polluted. You know what I mean? That money itself is halal. It's halal money, right? The time when that would be different is somebody went and they stole it. I stole the money, and I gave it to Uzair, and Uzair knows that it's stolen. That money itself is now impermissible for me to use. Student loans that you get, that money itself is halal. It's come from a halal source. The agreement you may have made may be impermissible. With Ostab, obviously it's fine, so long as you know you'll pay it off before your interest kicks in. And so to give it in charity is perfectly fine. Yeah.
Can you should we prioritize paying off the loan because that's like money versus donating to charity?
That's a good question, right? That comes down to, I think that's completely separate to the permissibility of giving it in charity. But yes, as a general thing, is if you have loans that need to be paid off, that is something that is necessary upon you. That should be prioritized over giving charity. But that doesn't take away from the reward of the charity, right? Giving charity will not then become sinful, right? The requirement to pay back a loan is maybe based on an agreement, and for sure before a person passes away. Yeah.
We'll move on to the next question. Sorry. We can only take one follow-up per question, just for the sake of time. So the next question is, what should or shouldn't males shave in terms of the hair on their bodies?
What should or shouldn't?
Yes. So
one thing they should shorten, if not shave, is the mustache, right? For males. One thing they shouldn't is the beard after a fistful, until a fistful. After a fistful, they're allowed to. The hair, shaving part of it and leaving part of it, that also shouldn't be. Otherwise, and then obviously cutting down the hair, shaving or not shaving, the pubic hair, which is the armpits, and in the crotch area, obviously, in around your private parts, that is also required. Not cutting it within 40 days becomes makruh. And otherwise, the rest of the body, it is allowed, but the books of fiqh are very interesting, and they say that it's against manliness, right? And it's against adab, many say. And we see that the Prophet ﷺ, he did have a line of hair coming from his chest, almost to his belly button, and he never did take it off. Yeah. Yes? No? Males, I guess this is a male's question, yes.
You said so a fistful. How do you measure a fistful?
From every direction, yeah. Fist.
Direction, or is it
From your jawline.
from Joe?
Yeah, so start from, when you bite and there's that, it protrudes, if you bite down, that's about where your jaw starts, all along your jawline and your cheeks.
It would be below or cheeks also?
So cheeks is the soft part, that's not your jaw. All this is allowed to be cut technically. I could probably go down to like here, right? And then even along your jawline, just as your jaw, all the soft part, all that you can take off. The point is you're good.
The next question, is it allowed to brush your teeth after suhoor? Like there's like a lot of times there's mint in the toothpaste, but if you, what if you spit like all the saliva out and make sure you don't swallow any of it?
Yeah, again, technically it is permissible, although according to the Hanafi school, it's something that is not recommended. Why I mentioned it in my class for the many students here who did join, that more often than not, when people are messaging me saying, Mufti, I think I broke my fast. Why? I was brushing my teeth and I swallowed something. Yes, your fast is technically broken, right? You have to make up for it. You wouldn't have to do the penalty of 60 days kafara. And so to avoid that, you should avoid brushing your teeth, and especially avoid using any sort of toothpaste. And one point I mentioned, a lot of people think that the brushing of the teeth will help get rid of the smell because you're fasting. It's only a temporary solution so long as the toothpaste is in your mouth. Why? Because generally the stench coming out of a fasting person's mouth when they're fasting is the smells that's coming from the stomach. It's not actually your mouth, because a miswak can clean out your mouth and any sort of plaque that may be smelling. But generally that stench that you're trying to cover up, it comes from the stomach. But yes, if you do it, it is permissible in the sense that you don't have to make up for it. If water or toothpaste is swallowed, then obviously that's a different story. Do I recommend it? No. Brush before suhoor and brush immediately after iftar if you really want, and throughout the day use miswak.
Okay. The next question is it discouraged for sisters to walk back home late after Taraweeh in a university setting especially?
No, I think that we live in a society, if you know that you'll be safe and you can you'll get home without any issues, then that is fine. Inshallah, not a problem. Yeah, we'll keep it simple, straightforward.
The next question is for joining Maghrib Jama'ah late. If you join in the third rak'ah, when you stand up to make the two that you missed, do you do the tahiyyat when you sit down? Do you do that after just one, or do you do it after both of the rak'ah that you make up? And also, do you recite surahs after the Fatiha in both rak'ahs?
So which of the 15 or 20 sisters that were asking this question last week is going to get up and explain it? This is I feel it's going to cause a lot of follow-ups. I think it may be my lack of clarity in explaining it, maybe, and I apologize for that. But it took a while to get to the point last week when we were discussing it. There's two principles that the Hanafi school follows. I'm not sure about the Shafi'i school. I don't know if we should open. I think it's going to be a can of worms. Whoever asks this question, just come see me later.
Okay.
I think it's best. Yeah.
Okay, inshallah. So the question, the next one is, if you have two destinations on your trip while traveling, the first is beyond the boundary, like beyond the 78 kilometers, and then the second is less than 70 or 88 kilometers from the house. Do you still pray the shortened prayers? Are you still allowed to shorten the prayers during this time because the travel isn't over? Or like for the second destination, because you're not that far from your home anymore, is the reasoning gone?
Once you've left your boundaries of your city and your intention from the moment you leave, your intention is a distance of the safar amount, which is 77 or 88, so long as you don't return back to your city, into the boundaries of your city, you are a traveler. I'll give you an example. I left Waterloo, which is where I live, and I stayed in Toronto for 1 hour. I stayed in Toronto for 2 minutes. I have passed the 88 kilometer distance. All right. On my way back, I stayed in Cambridge for 7 days. Even though I'm only 20 kilometers from Cambridge, in Cambridge, I will be musafir. I will be a traveler and I only perform 2. Why? Once I left my town, I made that 88 kilometer travel. And so until I don't return back to my town, I will be a musafir. I'll be a traveler and I'll shorten.
Follow up on this, is the 15 days, does that also pertain to like when you leave and when you come back, or does it like reset if you go to different places?
Exactly. It depends on how, it's 15 days in one place.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if I were to go to Toronto for 10 days and then Cambridge for 10 days, that's still...
Exactly.
I would still be musafir.
You'll still be musafir. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is, if I'm praying on my own and people come in and start a new congregational prayer, and you want to join them for the greater rewards, should you stop your prayer completely before joining them, or should you just join them? I guess like while in your prayer, you just join into their prayer.
No, because your prayer is completely separate. People can join you once you've started your individual prayer. You cannot go and join someone else. If you really want, finish yours off quickly and then go and join them. But otherwise, you need to finish off your prayer, and you cannot just join from yours to another. Once your intention has been established, you can't just join off into somebody else. Yeah.
Yes, Rehan.
No, you can join one person. That's the issue. Yeah, ideally, it's like you've watched somebody come into the masjid, there's like 5 minutes left for Maghrib. Most likely, they're going to be praying the Maghrib Salah. So you can join them.
No, no exceptions. The next question is, in terms of learning the Quran, should I focus instead on correcting the recitation, like improving tajweed, or should I instead focus on the translation of the Quran?
Right. I mean, the way to address this, the question, just so we understand, like my tajweed, for example, is not good right now, right? Should I focus more on that, or should I start learning the meanings of the surahs that I've already learned to read, for example? The way to look at it, or the way to address this, is look at what you need immediately, right? Like today, if I don't know the translation of a certain surah, will I be sinful? No, right? But if you don't know how to recite correctly, and because you're not reciting correctly, it could potentially lead to your salah not being valid, would you be then sinful? Yes, right? So, because your prayer, obviously, you'd be reciting incorrectly, and therefore, your prayer would, at the minimum, be deficient. even if you're not reciting with like tajweed or correcting your recitation. And so that's, I would say, something that would need to be immediately addressed, right? Recitation or practicing, spending time on correcting your recitation. And that too, right? I'm not saying like you just need to know the amount that will require you to be able to perform your salah correctly, right? So long as you know like your Fatiha properly and you know a few surahs, that will be sufficient for like 4 rak'ats of prayer, right? Technically you've done the minimum. And then after that, if you want to focus on your translation, I mean, both are fine, right? To do so. But this is where we need to be careful, right? Like the general principle, right? When we see something wrong in one direction, going to the exact opposite extreme is not always the solution, right? Like when I say that focus on tajweed, I'm not saying like you must become a perfect hafiz and qari of the Quran before you even touch the translation of the Quran. I don't mean that, right? And then I don't mean the other way where like you need to know everything that you're reciting, but it doesn't matter whether you're even reciting Surah Fatiha properly or not, right? There needs to be balance, there needs to be moderation. So I would say it's immediately look at what you need. If your minimum amount for salah is not correct and has not been made precise and proper, then that's something that should be focused on immediately. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have time for just one last question. So the question is listening to music in a language that you don't understand okay?
Oh yes, I seen this one. This one I made some notes about, and it's the last one. I'll spend just about 4 or 5 minutes on it, inshallah. Let me say it like this. All right, the question, and I'll be honest, I'm not going to answer if it's halal or haram. I'm not going to answer that. Right, I'll leave that to you, right? Because the music question is always often approached as halal or haram. Books are written on it. 20 hadith and 20 verses of the Quran are mentioned, and this opinion is giving this and this. The halal haram is always the discussion around this, right? But I think we really need to ask ourselves is why? Why? Like, even when it comes to nasheeds, right? We should be asking ourselves the question, why? Right? The purpose of poetry and these things like nasheeds, etc., right? It's to stir like religious sentiments, right? These feelings, these emotions in the heart. That's essentially the purpose of nasheeds and even poetry, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he would listen to poetry. Many of the Sahaba who were known for their poetry, there'll be times where they would come and say them to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ would be entertained by it. He would like it, and he would want to listen to it. But it was what? It was to really just stir religious sentiments and emotions in the heart, right? We probably all seen it. You ever hear somebody listen to a nasheed and they cry, right? Because it creates and it brews that religious, feelings and emotions, right? And so, I'm not giving a fatwa here. I'm saying we need to ask ourselves, right? Why would we want to listen to these things? If it's in a language you don't understand, why are you listening to it, right? If it's just to hear the melody and etc., those type of things, just for the sake of amusement, there really are better things that we can listen to, right? And then, I mean, if you want to get into mainstream music, we're not even that question there. You know what I mean? I don't even know why we talk about halal and haram when it comes to a lot of mainstream music, right? Like the vast majority of like mainstream music today, right? The content is so vulgar, right? The content is so like shameful many a time, right? The level of like explicit vulgarity that we talk about now is like, it's actually sometimes embarrassing, right? And what's happening is becoming normalized, right? Like you'll walk into a store and you'll hear certain artists talking about, and they'll bleep out some of the words. Right? They'll bleep it out, but it's become so normalized, and we want 9, 10, 11-year-old kids listening to this. Right? Like, we have to ask ourselves, we have to question. Like, you really want your, for example, 9 or 10-year-old brother or sister listening to Cardi B, right? Or listening to like, Nicki Minaj? You know what I'm saying? Like, what are they talking about? Everybody knows, right? I'm not a fool. You guys aren't fools. Everybody knows what their music is generally about, right? And like, we want to go and talk about halal haram there. Give me a break, man. It's not even a question, right? Like, just their content. Just think about the morality, right? Not morality, let's think about the immorality in what they're saying, right? In most of their lyrics and their content, right? So why a person would listen to it, wallahi, I don't know, right? And so if you're listening to it in a language, listening to music in a language you don't understand, is it okay? I don't see a purpose in doing it. Why would you do it? That's not even a question. Yes, the few scholars that have said that certain instruments are allowed and not allowed, I don't even think we're at that point. If you don't even understand what it's talking about, how are you even going to gauge that what the content of that is vulgar or not? And so, again, let's start asking ourselves these questions. Why? Right? We just want to know the halal haram of things, and it's like we've boiled Islam down to a textbook or a manual. Right? Let's start questioning why. What's the consequences, and the things that it can do to me, and the way I think, and the effects that it has on children, on society, and on my family. We need to start looking at things from a more broader perspective and a little bit more critically, inshallah. Yeah, I'm leaving it at that.
Okay, and I think we'll end it off there. Jazakallah khairan, Mufti, for all the answers. Inshallah, many of us will benefit from everything that you answered. Inshallah, this won't be the last time we do any fiqh Q&A stuff. I know there were a lot of questions and follow-ups that we didn't get to, but inshallah, we'll have other opportunities in the future to address them. Jazakallah khairan everyone for attending and for giving your questions.